She humiliated the class bully, then everyone learned why humans are feared. Let's talk about Zekthara Voss for a second, because I promise you, he deserves the introduction. Zek was a Draconi noble cadet, 7 feet of iridescent scales, aristocratic cheekbones, and the kind of inherited confidence that only comes from never once being told no. He walked into the Interstellar Academy's shared xenobiology class like he owned the building, which, to be fair, his family probably did own several buildings, just not this one. Zek had a hobby. Not sports, not music, not even the traditional Draconi pastime of hoarding shiny things and lying about your kill count. No, Zek's hobby was bullying. Specifically, bullying species his tutors politely referred to as developmentally modest. He had a whole ranking system in his head, a little mental leaderboard of who to torment and in what order, based entirely on how squishy and defenseless they looked. And then, 3 weeks into the semester, a new name got added to his list. A human. Now, if Zek had done even 5 minutes of research, he might have noticed something. Every single alien species that had encountered humanity before had, at some point, filed a report containing the phrase, "Please do not provoke them." But Zek didn't read reports. Zek read faces, and human faces, God love them, look like sad, hairless, slightly sunburned monkeys who forgot where they left their claws. Prime bullying material, he figured. He figured wrong. But we'll get there. Her name was Mira Callahan, and she was, by every visible metric, unremarkable. Medium height, tired eyes, permanently attached to a thermos of coffee like it was performing life support. She didn't posture. She didn't announce herself. She sat in the back of class, took notes, and occasionally muttered something dry under her breath that made the Vicarian next to her snort so hard he nearly dislodged his breathing apparatus. This is, historically, how humans operate. We don't walk into rooms demanding attention. We walk in, get a coffee, evaluate the exits, and quietly clock exactly which threats in the room are actually threats. It's not paranoia. It's a bit we've been doing since we were small, clawless primates getting picked off by things with actual claws, so forgive us for developing a healthy background process of, could this kill me, and if so, how fast could I make it regret it? Zek clocked none of this. Zek clocked a quiet human woman who didn't talk much, and filed her immediately under easy target, category, squishy. The humiliation attempt happened during a joint training exercise in the zero-gravity bay, the kind of class where you're supposed to demonstrate basic spatial coordination while your professor watches and grades you on not embarrassing yourself or the academy. Zek, ever the team player, decided this would be the perfect stage. He waited until Mira was mid-maneuver, floating through a calibration course, and casually adjusted her tether input during a distracted moment when the instructor's back was turned. It wasn't dangerous, not exactly, Draconi nobles aren't stupid enough to risk actual expulsion, but it was enough to send her spinning wildly off course in front of the entire class, arms flailing, dignity evaporating into the recycled air. The class laughed. Zek preened. He made a comment, something insufferably smug about how humans clearly weren't built for advanced environments, how it was almost sad watching her struggle, how maybe humanity's finest achievement was learning to walk upright, and even that seemed generous in hindsight. Real original stuff. A plus comedy from a guy whose species communicates status through how many rings they can afford to pierce into their own tail. Here's the thing about that moment, though, the thing Zek completely missed because he was too busy admiring his own wit. Mira wasn't panicking. She stabilized herself in about 2 seconds flat, using nothing but core control and spite, and floated there in dead silence for a beat too long. The kind of silence that, if you'd ever met a human before, you'd recognize as extremely bad news. Then she smiled. Not a big smile. A small, calm, almost pleasant one. The kind of smile serial killers in movies do right before the lights go out. Cute, she said, voice level, coming from the species whose home planet's dominant food source is literally itself. The class lost it. Actual, genuine, can't-breathe laughter, the Vicarian kid practically choked on his own atmosphere. Zek's smug expression cracked for the first time, just slightly, right at the corner of his jaw. It's a small thing. But it's always a small thing first. That's how you know the countdown started. See, humans have this weird, terrifying talent for converting public humiliation into fuel. You embarrass us in front of a crowd, we don't shrink, we recalibrate. It's basically a biological feature at this point. Somewhere back on Earth, some cavemen got laughed out of the tribe for a bad hunt and came back a week later having personally invented the spear. We don't forget. We definitely don't forgive. We plan. Zek, still riding high on his own ego despite the crack in the foundation, decided the correct move here was escalation. Because of course it was. When you've spent your whole life never losing, double down, is the only strategy you know. The Academy's mandatory combat simulation was scheduled for the following week, a full-contact sparring trial designed to test tactical adaptability under pressure, and Zek, in front of the entire class, publicly challenged Mira to a one-on-one bout. Not because the curriculum required it. Because he wanted to finish what he started, permanently, with an audience. It was, and I cannot stress this enough, the single dumbest decision that scaly aristocrat had made in his entire pampered life. Challenging a human to a fight because you embarrassed her once is roughly equivalent to a toddler challenging a house fire to a wrestling match because the fire looked at him funny. It might look impressive for the first 4 seconds. After that, things get real bad, real fast, and somebody's calling for help. The professor, an ancient, world-weary Grexian named Instructor Thalvern who had clearly seen some things in his long teaching career, tried to talk Zek out of it. Not out of concern for Mira. Out of concern for Zek. He actually said, verbatim, Cadet Voss would strongly reconsider, in the exact tone you'd use to warn a friend not to pet the raccoon that's clearly not scared of you. Zek didn't listen. Zek never listened. That was kind of his whole thing. The sparring bout itself has since become, and I say this with zero exaggeration, one of the most replayed training clips in the Academy's history. Zek came in fast, all size and confidence, expecting Mira to either dodge frantically or collapse under the first solid hit. What he got instead was a woman who moved like she'd already watched this fight happen a dozen times in her head and was mildly bored by the outcome. Mira didn't fight like the aliens fight, all raw strength and roaring displays. She fought quiet. Efficient. She let him overcommit on his first strike, sidestepped with almost insulting ease, and used his own momentum to put him face first into the mat. The room went dead silent. Zek got up, furious now, and came at her again, bigger, faster, angrier. She adapted. That's the part that really got the aliens in the room, the way she adjusted mid-fight, reading his patterns and punishing every mistake before he even realized he'd made it. There's a reason for that, and it's not some secret human superpower or magic space marine training. It's just history. Ugly, relentless, educational history. Humans spent a few 100,000 years getting hunted by things bigger, faster, and better armed than us, and we didn't survive by being the strongest. We survived by being adaptable, patient, and absolutely willing to fight dirty if it meant seeing tomorrow. Add a few thousand years of humans being extremely creative about hurting each other in wars, and you get a species with a genuinely unsettling talent for violence when properly motivated. Zek was very, very motivating. By the third exchange, Zek was breathing hard, bleeding from a split lip, and visibly rattled, the kind of rattle that comes from realizing, mid-fight, that you have made a catastrophic miscalculation about the food chain. Mira wasn't even winded. She caught his next strike, twisted, and had him on the ground with his own arm pinned behind him in about a second and a half, calm as anything, like she was reorganizing a filing cabinet. The room stayed silent for a solid 3 seconds after that. Then the whispering started. I want you to imagine, if you can, an entire classroom of alien students, species who've spent generations building empires and starships and weapons of unspeakable destructive power, suddenly recalibrating their entire understanding of humanity in real time. You could practically hear the mental notes being typed out. Do not provoke the quiet ones. The soft-looking ones are the dangerous ones. Someone tell the ambassador we may have miscategorized an entire species. A Zentari student near the back, someone who'd clearly done their reading, muttered something to a friend about how humans were the ones you don't poke twice, which, fun fact, is basically the unofficial Galactic saying about our species at this point, and it's not wrong. Instructor Thalvern, watching Zek get peeled off the mat by two very unimpressed medics, just sighed the long, tired sigh of a man who tried to warn people and got ignored anyway. He didn't even bother pretending to be surprised. He just pulled out a datapad and started filing a formal review, and it was very much not about Myra's conduct. Zek's fall from grace was, frankly, glorious to watch unfold. His family's name carried weight at the academy, sure, but public humiliation carries its own kind of gravity, and this particular incident had about 400 witnesses and at least a dozen recordings by the time it hit the student network. His superior officer, a grizzled old Draconi commander who had apparently dealt with humans before, gave him a lecture in front of half the barracks that reportedly included the line, "You picked a fight with the species that ended wars by inventing bigger wars, what did you think was going to happen?" Rough. But accurate. His social standing cratered. Cadets who used to flock around him started finding excuses to be somewhere else. The Draconi noble who couldn't lose suddenly couldn't stop losing, one embarrassing retelling at a time, at every mess hall table in the academy. Karma, it turns out, doesn't care about bloodlines. Mira, for her part, didn't gloat. Didn't need to. She just picked her thermos back up, took a sip of coffee that had definitely gone cold by then, and walked off the mat like nothing had happened, which honestly was the most terrifying part of the whole thing to everyone watching. Someone finally worked up the nerve to ask her, right there in the hallway afterward, why she hadn't just reported Zek after the first incident instead of letting it escalate all the way to a public sparring match. Mira just shrugged, completely unbothered, and said the line that ended up plastered across half the academy's internal chat boards by the next morning. Wanted to see how far he'd dig before he hit water. That was it. That was the whole quote. No dramatic music, no big speech, just a woman finishing her coffee and walking away, and somehow that landed harder than any grand declaration could have. It became a running joke across campus within the week, muttered by students whenever someone was about to do something spectacularly ill-advised. How far are you gonna dig before you hit water? By the following semester, the story had made its way to other campuses, other systems, picking up embellishments along the way these things always do. Some versions had Mira single-handedly disarming Zek with her bare hands, other versions swore she quoted ancient earth poetry mid-fight, which, no, she absolutely did not, but nobody was letting facts get in the way of a good legend. The moral, if you're the sort of person who needs one spelled out, is pretty simple. Humans don't look dangerous. That's kind of the point. We're soft, slow, embarrassingly fragile compared to half the galaxy's wildlife, let alone its sentient species. But we've spent our entire history getting knocked down by things bigger and meaner than us and getting back up anyway, a little smarter and a little more patient each time. So the next time some overconfident alien noble decides the quiet human in the back of the class is an easy target, somebody, somewhere, should probably pull him aside and gently explain that the soft-looking ones are usually the ones you don't poke twice. Zek learned that lesson the hard way, in front of 400 witnesses, with a split lip and a permanently dented ego. Mira just finished her coffee.